Hi guys, bringing you a video today on the 1975 pattern British Army trial load carrying equipment. This is commonly referred to as 1972 pattern in the collecting world. However, official nomenclature seems to have been 1975 pattern. There's an interesting document which refers to this and the trials which were undertaken with it in the early 1970s. Along with the trial 1958 pattern made in nylon, the Mark II 1958 pattern, which I'll talk about in another video at a later date. But this is the 1975 pattern. It's a bit of a break from previous British load carrying equipment designs. First of all, it's made of nylon, and as far as I'm aware, it's the first nylon equipment to be trialled. I could be wrong on that. But as far as I'm aware, it's the first nylon equipment to be trialled by the British Army. It's a combination, in a way, of load-bearing vest thinking and standard web equipment, in that it doesn't have a belt per se, but it does maintain the system of supporting the pouch and so on with a yoke, or suspenders, whatever you want to call them, depending on where you're from. Certainly the British nomenclature is a yoke. So we'll have a look at this now. First of all, we've got on each side essentially a mirror image of a utility pouch and a magazine pouch, and then but in the back, one large rear pouch suspended on, as you can see here, the yoke at the top, which is similar to the 1958 pattern. We'll have a look at the details of that in a moment. The utility pouches, well, the magazine pouch is starting at the far end first. The magazine pouches close with press studs, and they will take a single self-loading rifle magazine like that, and we'll close with the tighter of the two press studs. Now, at the time, if I can get that on there, it's a bit tight. There we go. But there are two press studs there to allow you to close it tight or looser. I'm not entirely sure the reason for that, but as you can see there, it will take a single SLR magazine. The utility pouch next to it, and obviously there's a mirror image on each side essentially. If I get this open, the fastenings here, as you can see, are taken essentially from the M1967, the US M1967 load carrying equipment, plastic closures there. That's basically where the design comes from. These can be used to carry several magazines stacked alongside one another in this manner, but they will also quite neatly take the 1958 pattern water bottle and cup. Will fit quite neatly in there as well. So in terms of load carrying equipment, you have the utility pouches can be used for either. This one on the left, of course, has the loops for the bayonet, analogous to the 1958 and 1944 pattern equipment that had gone before. We're carrying the bayonet on the side of the pouch there. Of course, don't have that on the other side. The other side is, however, pretty much analogous. I also have down here rivets for hanger hooks, and I would presume these are to be able to carry a machete or something similar in both the 1944 pattern and the later Golok type machete. The scabbards, the sheaths rather, both have hanger hooks which could be used to attach them onto there. Now the rear pouch is interesting. The rear compartment, it's quite large. You could certainly fit mess tins, small kit, some small kit, and a 24-hour ration pack in here quite easily. And I would imagine that's the kind of load that this is designed for. It also has, integral to the pouch, in the 1958 pattern web equipment, the Poncho Carrier, the Poncho roll, also has a place where you can stow the head of the pick, and this dispenses with that. But as you can see here, the bottom has this pouch with the fix lock closures, which would be used later on various pieces of clothing and equipment. And if we open this up here, come on, there we go. This pouch here would give room to carry the pick head in the bottom. Now, you also have a loop here for the pick handle. And this again, this has a cam buckle, which if we open it up here, show you the back of that, bring it up to the camera there. It's again a fixed lock component. This out again. Then further up on the yoke, we have the 1958 pattern type of fixture for the pick handle, which is to say this piece of webbing with the male part of the lift dot fastener, which would fit into the hole on the end of the handle, so of the pick or the shovel for that matter. Obviously it's made of nylon, which is a change from the web equipment that had gone before. This was largely prompted on two reasons which are linked. First of all, water retention. The 1958 pattern web equipment, when it got wet, gained considerable weight, which was seen as a major disadvantage, which it is, and it would be a gripe certainly from people I've spoken to who served in the Falklands, was obviously when your web equipment got wet, it did add to your load noticeably, which is borne out in the study I mentioned, which concerns this Mark II 1958 pattern, along with a comparison with the standard cotton webbing 1958 pattern. And it mentions in there, it actually has a table in the document which details the difference not between this and 1958 pattern, but the nylon version of 1958 pattern. It compares the weight of them dry and the weight once wet, and the increase in weight for the cotton version is considerable. This of course is also one of the reasons the US invested in producing nylon equipment for use in Vietnam in tropical conditions, due to the wet conditions prevalent there. Essentially, the other reason is due to MBC considerations, consideration of MBC decontamination. That is, cotton webbing absorbs water. It will also absorb chemical agents, and is therefore exceedingly difficult to decontaminate, in fact impossible essentially. So you would have to bin all your web equipment and so on, whereas this has the chance of being decontaminated because it's a lot harder for liquids to impregnate the material. So back onto the rear pouch. We'll talk more about the yoke in a minute. That's part of the external stowage. You also have straps which go around the body of the rear pack, as you can see there, two of them there, and they buckle to this side here. I will turn the equipment over in a moment so you can have a proper look at the back as well. Now these buckles are styled after the American pull down type used in metal on the M67, and I believe the American nylon equipment was considered in the trial and certainly looked at, so it would seem sensible that as it predates this slightly, it was an inspiration for some of the components here. And these are made of khaki plastic, so a lot of the components on this are plastic rather than metal. Obviously these are as well, and the buckle is metal, and the buckles on the yoke that we'll look at in a minute are metal, but a large proportion of the components are plastic. You also have underneath the flap, which will open here, the compartment at the top. I'm just manoeuvring myself here, get a better look at this. Again has a fixed lock slider to open it, which hasn't been used for a while, a little bit stiff there. You have this one large compartment at the rear, which was developed based on the notion that the divided kidney pouches of the 58 pattern were not particularly versatile. One of the major driving factors behind the design of 75 pattern, the 1975 pattern equipment, was experience of the British Army in the Far East, in the jungles, where it was noted that 1958 pattern wasn't suitable really, certainly not as a complete set, and this was partly designed for as a more flexible set for patrol work and so on. However, as the report, which I'll link in the description of the video, shows, it wasn't really that versatile, and was certainly maligned for that fact. We'll get onto that in a minute. There are stowage loops under the flap here, as you can see, which could be used, I'm assuming, for carrying a load underneath the flap rolled up before the flap was buckled over. Turn this over. Well, bring the yoke up for you to have a look at now, and then we'll turn it over and have a look at the back. The back of the yoke, the straps come down a la 58 pattern. The buckles here, they come down, loop through, and then a la the front method of attaching the 58 pattern yoke onto the ammunition pouches, here used on the back, comes back up to a buckle, and you then have the pull tightening on the straps there. So the strap comes down, you pass it through this plastic D-ring on the back of the rear pouch, back up to this buckle on the yoke, and you can tighten it down that way. We've already looked at the fixture for attaching the pickaxe handle or shovel. Move to the front of the yoke here. This is where the yoke straps end. Each of these utility stroke ammunition pouches at the front have a strap that come up and simply go through this 9044 pattern type buckle here and pull down to tighten. So you've got a lot of variability in the length of carrying there. Quite a lot of padding, quite nicely padded. The yoke, again, just made of nylon, but otherwise very similar to the 58 pattern in the dimensions and so on, quite similar in that regard. So we'll just turn this all the way over. Come back here. Turn this all the way over. I've got the straps tucked away here. You can see there's no belt, and this is one interesting feature of this equipment. There is no belt. The utility pouches buckle onto the rear pouch using these buckles here and straps attached to the rear pouch. Then basically you can just tighten them in as much as you like. That was actually one thing mentioned in the report that was brought up during trials as a negative aspect of the equipment. Whether that was due to merely soldiers' preconception of previous equipment isn't made clear, but certainly that was something that was mentioned as reducing versatility. The interesting thing with this equipment is it's designed, one of the things that supposedly makes it more versatile is that it's designed to be worn with this rear pack, this rear pouch, in which you can carry a combat load. So this is, you can carry a combat load in this, but from this pattern of equipment, several issue items of equipment, of course this was never issued, this set here, several issue items of equipment did evolve from this trial, including the SAS and General Service rucksacks, and from a later requirement the Royal Marine Arctic Bergen, which are made of a similar nylon material, and the early ones feature the plastic components, plastic D-rings and so on. So in that regard it was supposed to be more versatile from that point of view. When worn with the rucksack you could carry your spare clothing, sleeping gear and so on in that, and then you could just have this for your combat load. The actual waist fastening, or the closest thing in this lot that you can consider a belt, is merely the adjustment strap at the front, which fixes with this. It's the same buckle, and you can see the evolution of this. It's the same buckle as used with the Royal Marine Arctic Bergen waist belt, and it's simply a case of slotting that in there, and then this piece that the belt slots into is then hinged to give some movement, and the strap pulls through, obviously very similar to seatbelt material, nylon, plastic tip on the end there, and you just pull that to tighten. So there's adjustability there for wearing over different forms of clothing. Obviously these straps would be adjusted for the wearer's waist, and then this would allow adjustment once it had been set up. This would allow some adjustment regarding, depending on what type of clothing, the amount of clothing that was being worn and so on. So there we have it, the 1975 pattern trial equipment. A very interesting design, obviously draws from both British and American practice. Certainly saw trials, as you can see on the back, the central pouch here, we have number Lawrence and A Troop. So issued for trials, never adopted officially. Further work then went into the 1958 pattern Mark II equipment, which was made in nylon, which we'll talk about in another video. Again, never actually issued in the end, and all of this development work eventually from the mid-80s trials, moved on to the 1990 pattern personal load carrying equipment, which obviously is still around today in various forms, now made in, first made in green, then made in DPM, and now in MTP. But it took all this trial work through the 70s and 80s to finally get to that answer to the question of personal load carrying equipment. So, as usual, as I always say, I hope you found that interesting. Something a little bit different, which I thought was necessary. We've had a lot of sort of issue items recently, and I had this to hand and thought, why not do a video on it? There is more information available on this online. As I say, I'll link the article in the description, which is definitely worth a read if you're interested in the development of British equipment in the Cold War era. And yeah, that's it for now from me, and as I say, I hope you found it interesting, and bye for now.